on those two, Tuesday and Wednesday, I was just out. Yeah. So just give us some time to think about it. So, and the intention is don't let it discourage you. Don't let it discourage you. All right, don't let it discourage you. Okay. I mean, there's a way of making up, and I've already tried to see what to do. Yeah. So just give me some time to think about what to do. All right. Okay. I hope some more students will join. I'm just trying to delay a little bit to see if some more students will join before we start the teaching. Anyway, let's start. I mean, I'm sure they will join along the line. All right. Okay, so today what we'll be talking about is, as you see on your screens, we talk about business cycles, demand determined output in the Keynesian system, and then we also talk about equilibrium in the simple Keynesian system. Okay. All right. Now let's look at what business cycles are. So when we say business cycles, we are looking at economic-wide fluctuations in national output, national income, national employment, and it lasts for a period between 2 to 10 years. It is marked by widespread expansions and contractions in most sectors of the economy. Okay, so that's what business cycle is. Let's look at the GDP values over a period of some 10 years, 2 to 10 years. Are we seeing any periods of expansion, any periods of contraction, and that kind of thing? All right. So that is what a business cycle is. So it is an economic-wide fluctuations in national output or income or employment, and it usually lasts for a period of 2 to 10 years. Okay. And business cycles have two main phases. There's the expansion, and then there is the recession. Okay. In the next slide, there is an example there that you see. An example of what an expansion is and what a recession is. Okay, there's an expansion and then there is a recession. Okay, so here you are. All right, so this is an example of a business cycle. So it's showing the different phases of the business cycle. So this line you see here is GDP. Okay, is the GDP value. All right. Between the period within which the cycle is occurring, we can see a clear trend. The trend is this upward, irrespective of the peaks and then the troughs. There's an upward trend that the GDP is following. Okay, that is what we are referring to as a trend. Okay, but along this trend, a lot of things are happening. We will see GDP having a peak here and another peak here. Okay, and then GDP, the trend of the GDP, there's a trough. So the trough is the fall and the peak. So more or less within the neighborhood of these years, okay, within this neighborhood, within this time period, the neighborhood of this time period, this GDP peaked on this specific year. But after that peak, it reduced until it reached its minimum at a particular time, okay? And then from then, it increases until it gets to another peak, okay? The movement from one peak to the lowest point, the trough, signifies a contraction in the GDP, all right? So that's what you see down there, contraction in the GDP. And then the movement from the lowest point of one point of the GDP to the peak represents what? Expansion. GDP is increasing throughout. Okay, so there is some expansion going on. So there's a contraction between a peak and a trough. When GDP drops, there is an expansion between the trough and the peak if GDP does what? Expands. Okay, now look at what happens between here and here. What is happening between here and here is that the economy is doing what? Is contracting. But from the lowest point here up, what is happening is that the economy is on a recovery path. Recovery simply means that GDP keeps increasing, okay? GDP is increasing. So we are on a recovery path. So that is what you see here until, say, for the period. All right. So the boom here is simply referring to a situation where along the recovery path, GDP comes back to its original peak. All right. It comes back to its original peak and goes beyond it. So we call it a period of boom. Okay. We call it a period of boom. Okay. Is that clear? Is it clear? Send me some messages and let me be sure it's clear. You can raise your hand and ask a question if you want to. Okay. So it's a unanimous yes. It's a unanimous yes. And those shouting yay, I can also see you. Okay. All right. So that's it. So Maurice, I've seen your take it again. All right. I'll try and take it again. I'll try and summarize it. Okay. So we are just trying to describe this business cycle. And I'm saying that, okay, and I'm saying that the business cycle goes through different phases. There is the contraction phase where GDP declines continuously. And there is the expansion phase where the GDP does what? Increases continuously. There's a contraction where it decreases continuously. Then there's the expansion when it increases continuously. We have the peaks that shows the highest level of GDP at a particular point in time. Okay, so over a period of time, the peak is the highest value of GDP that you get. And then we have the trough. Okay, within that trough, we have the lowest value for GDP. Okay, now the difference between this and this here is that from the peak, the economy contracted, GDP declined. But when it got to the minimum of the trough, it started doing what? Recovering. So the economy was on a recovery path. It was on a recovery path. The moment it gets to its original values of GDP and goes beyond it, then we call it what? In a boom. All right. So I mean, COVID has happened. Most economies are following this trend. They are following this trend. They will be contracting during this period of COVID simply because a lot of economic activities are not taking place. Manufacturers are not producing as their maximum, and people are not buying, that kind of thing. So we expect the economy to contract a little bit. But I mean, there's evidence that for some economies, they started recovering. Okay, Ghana is an example. We started recovering. Okay, so we are on this path. We've not gotten back to the original GDP before COVID came in 2020. We've not gotten there yet, but we'll get there. We'll get there. And even there are signs that shows that we will even go beyond that. Okay, so we may gradually enter into a certain boom period. Okay. Okay. So Maurice, we are not talking of breaking even here yet. Okay, we are not talking about breaking even here yet. Okay, if we are breaking even, we have to do a comparison between something and something. Here we are not doing anything of that sort. Okay, we are not doing anything of that sort. Okay, all right. So that's the business cycle for you. It's in different phases. Okay, so an expansion is continuous. It's a continuous period of increase in total output, employment, and incomes, and it is marked by growth of many sectors of the economy. So macroeconomics, then the wonderful thing that happens is that when GDP is increasing, employment will be increasing. Employment will be increasing, and incomes will also be doing what? Incomes will also be going up. Okay. So Rebecca Naki Ofori has asked a very important question. So because of that question, let me go back. It says, "Sir, please, what does the government do to get the economy out of the trough?" Okay, so it's a very, very good question. It's a very, very good question. So the government does a lot of things. Okay, there is this, I don't know if you've heard of this Great Depression in the 1930s. Okay, it was a Great Depression that led to the birth of this thing called Keynesian economics. Okay, during the Great Depression, the economy, or most economies in the world, were somewhere down here in the trough. And there was this need to get a solution to. So first of all, there should be an explanation as to how the economy got into the trough. During the Great Depression, it was a series of factors, but one key thing was simply because aggregate demand was too low. Aggregate demand was too low. So one of the propositions from Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, was that let us do what? Increase aggregate demand. How can we increase aggregate demand? Let's government spend. Okay, let government spend. So actually, what leads to the recovery part depends on an economic diagnosis of what really caused the economy to come down to that trough. So there are a couple of things that government can do, give tax incentives to manufacturing firms so that they can increase output and reducing taxes so that people can still get a lot of disposable income to spend, government incurring direct expenditures, okay? So all of these things, a lot of them, okay? A lot of them, giving even support to even financial institutions that are not doing well. All of those things are important in moving the economy on the recovery part, okay? So that, yes. So Rebecca, I hope I've answered your question. And David, yes. So please, sir, please, so an uncomfortable, of course, an uncontrollable recession leads to a depression, okay? It leads to a depression. It leads to a depression, okay? It leads to a depression, okay? All right. So an expansion is a continuous period of increase in total output, employment, and income, and it is marked by growth of many sectors of the economy. A recession is a recurring period of decline in total output, income, and employment. It lasts usually for 6 months to a year, and it is marked by widespread contractions in many sectors of the economy, okay? Widespread contraction in many sectors of the economy. All right, so who has raised their hand? Let me see. Whose hand is up? Michael, please unmute and ask your question.
Sir, please, can you record a class for us so that in case after the lecture, we can still go back and play it and learn it again?
You see, so that I get you. I mean, I think who even asked the same question? Ruby. Unfortunately, I'm still using an account that is not mine. I'm trying to migrate to Microsoft Teams. So somebody is showing me how to maneuver things around the Microsoft Teams. And that is when I can record. This is not my account, okay? It's not my account. So I don't even know how I'll get a video and share it with you. Okay, so pardon me. I will make sure when I get, the university was supposed to provide us with Zoom, but I'm told they are migrating away from Zoom. So they are no longer sharing Zoom IDs. But what is happening is they want us to start using Microsoft Teams. I've started it. I've even tried. Who wants to record? Somebody can record. I don't have a problem. I think last time somebody tried recording or somebody did record. So anybody can record. I don't have a problem with that. Okay. Is that okay? Zainab? Yes. Okay, so somebody's probably recording. That's good. All right. Okay. So good. All right. So a recession is a recurring period of decline in total output, income, and employment, lasting usually 6 months to a year, and marked by widespread contractions in many sectors of the economy. Okay. All right. A depression is a deep and extended recession, and that was what David was talking about. So we have extended periods of recession, then it is what? It is a depression, okay? Extended periods of recession is a depression. And any question, let me allow you to ask any question. So you can raise your hand and ask a question, okay? You can raise your hand and ask a question, or we should go on. All right. Okay, so let's move on. So let's look at some characteristics of recession. Yes, if the economy is growing, how will I do that? Jordan, how will I give you the permission to record? Okay, let me pick a few questions from Jude. You can unmute and ask your question. Jude or Anthony? Any of you can unmute and ask your question.
Yes.
Hello,
Okay,
sir.
Anthony. Yes, Anthony.
Please, I wanted to ask, please, can you explain more on the difference between the economic recession and depression?
Oh, so recession, we are having extended periods of depression. Depression is extended periods of recession. So maybe a recession, if a recession will last for just 6 months or so, if it goes beyond that 6 months and it's still going, then we say we are in some form of what? A depression. Matilda.
Sir,
Yes.
yeah, please, I want to know if there is equilibrium in the business cycle.
We've not gotten there yet. No,
Okay.
equilibrium, we have to bring some two things together. And those two things should be in some form of stability. And that's what we call an equilibrium. Okay. Okay. So I think what is confusing you is the trend line. This trend line is just to show that generally, if you look at it more broadly, GDP appears to be on an increase. So this line here, this straight line here, is not what is leading to any equilibrium. We are not using it. We are just trying to use it to show the path of GDP over time. All right. Okay. So we are just using it to show the path of GDP over time. It's not to show any equilibrium. All right. Okay. A few people are trying to. Okay. All right. So you guys don't worry. We'll figure out how to deal with this recording thing later on. All right. So now let's deal with some of the characteristics of periods of recession. Let's look at some characteristics or what happens in the economy when we have a recession. So when we have a recession, there's a sharp contraction in consumer spending. Okay, there's a sharp contraction in consumer spending, and this reflects in unexpected accumulation of business inventories, especially of consumer goods. You see that what happens is that when you go to the stores of firms, a lot of goods are stuck in there. And they can only produce more if their inventories, if their stores or their where they keep their goods are getting empty. That is only when they can produce. All right. That is when. So you see that a lot of people are not spending. There's a contraction in consumer spending, and business have accumulated a lot of inventory. Okay. So the inventory we are referring to here are the goods that are stored in their stores that they are yet to sell. Okay. And then there will be a fall in labor demand. First fall in work, there will be a fall in working hours. Because if firms are keeping inventories and people are not buying it, the best thing for you as a producer is to reduce the number of hours your workers come to work. Subsequently, the next thing you will do is to do what? Lay some of them off. Then you keep your most skilled and the permanent workers, you keep them. But gradually, that is what happens. You keep reducing the number of people that you need that will work for you. Okay, Anthony, just a minute, then I'll allow you to speak. Then there's a fall in inflation. If people are not buying, as consumer demand falls, price levels fall. And this you can easily explain. Because there is an inventory, there's okay. So because there is inventory, the supply of a good is lower than because there's an inventory, how much is being demanded is lower than how much is being supplied. Okay, how much is being demanded is lower than how much is being supplied. The most obvious thing to do in an equilibrium situation is to reduce prices. Okay, so reduce prices. So yes, I mean, that's what happens in a recession. And there are a lot of causes of a recession. I mean, so far as the fall in GDP is prolonged over more than a 6-month period, it's a recession. So, well, COVID will lead to some countries having a recession, others will not. Doing so, yes, it was prolonged, so it was a period, but the question really is, I haven't checked the figures, but let's interrogate the figures and see what was happening to GDP during the period of the doom so. Okay, let's look at, and that was what will answer the question of whether there was a recession or not. Okay, all right, okay. Somebody had a question. Where is the person? Oh, the person has run away. Is it David? Not David. There was somebody who raised their hand. Was it you, David?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Please, I was asking whether the 1983 hunger in Ghana was a result of recession.
The 1983 what?
Famine in Ghana.
Yes. It was that time we had a recession. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so there's also going to be a sharp fall in business profits simply because of the recession. So this is what happens during periods of recession. All right. So in your IA or your exams, when you're asked to mention some characteristics of what happens in the economy during the recession, you should be able to list some of these things. All right. Okay. Now let's look at the main theories of business cycle. Okay. What are the theories of business cycles? Okay, so when we are talking of the theories of business cycle, we are saying that what are the factors that is leading to either a recession or an expansion? Yes, Akosia, please unmute and ask your question.
Please, I wanted to ask that, does it mean that there was a recession after COVID-19? Because during that time, government of Ghana paid water bills and things.
Okay. So even though our GDP declined during the COVID time, don't forget we are still in COVID. COVID is not away yet. So when the GDP declined, our GDP did decline during the COVID time, but it wasn't prolonged. All right, it wasn't prolonged. Okay, I think by the first quarter of 2021, we started recovering. Okay, we started recovering and things were getting better. But the incentives that the government gave was simply to do what? To help people cope with the COVID. Okay, to help people cope with the COVID. Don't forget, one of the key recommendations to minimizing the spread of the COVID was for people to do what? To wash their hands. And government felt one of the incentives that it can give for people to continuously keep washing their hands is when the water is free. Okay. So it wasn't really things to deal with recession per se, but it was to deal with the issue of COVID. Okay, to deal with the issue of COVID. And it was not just free electricity and free water. I mean, businesses through the National Board for Small Scale Industries, they got some, and there was some small money for small firms, and then that kind of thing. All right. Okay. All right. So now let's come back to the two main theories of business cycle. So there are two of them. We have the exogenous, and then we have the internal. So when we say exogenous, we are saying that the sources of business cycles are factors outside the economic system that leads to what? Economic fluctuations. So for instance, if there's an election, for instance, if there is an oil price shock, okay, when there's an oil price shock, it will lead to the GDP not following that smooth path. Okay, it could decline, it could go up. Some people will benefit, some people will not. That kind of thing. There's a discovery of new resources. The discovery of new resources immediately will lead to economy expanding. When there is a war, immediately the GDP will drop. When there's COVID, GDP will drop, that kind of thing. All right. So those are exogenous. They are outside the economic system. Okay, things that are outside the economic system that lead to what? Economic fluctuations. Okay. Then for the internal sources of business cycle, we are looking at, yes, you can see external sources. You can also see external sources. And for the internal sources of business cycle, we are looking at mechanisms within the business cycle that generates expansion and expansions and contractions, okay? What are those things within the business cycle that creates? So for instance, when there is panic buying and people unnecessarily consume, and so during Christmas times and those things, there's some form of panic buying and people just all of a sudden buy things. The economy can decide to go up, come down, depending on how things go, all right? Depending on how things go, okay? So elections, we can say, is an example of exogenous. No, it's elections in your home country. You are not, and Daryl, you are not affected by elections in other people's countries. Well, not directly. Okay, you are not affected by elections in people's countries directly. So it's elections in your country. Okay, when people are having their elections, it doesn't threaten us. Okay, yes, Matilda.
Sir, please, how is oil price shocks a source of exogenous source of business cycle?
Okay, so what happens is this: if there is so OPEC, if they decide that, well, they don't like the prices, so OPEC is an example of a form of a cartel. If they decide, and you know what these cartels can do, they can decide to create a shortage of oil, and because oil is used in virtually everything, transportation costs will go up. If there's a shortage of oil, transportation costs will go up. Firms will not be able to produce as expected, that kind of thing. And it happens, it affects a lot of things, okay? So that's what happens, okay? People will not be able to produce, schools will have to close down, or even this online teaching will never happen, even if there is an oil price shock, assuming we use oil to power the electricity and all those type of things. So that's what happens, okay? That is what happens. I hope I've answered you. I've forgotten the name of the person. All right, good, Matilda. All right. Now, business cycles may also be induced by aggregate demand or what? Aggregate supply. So those are the internal sources, okay? So demand-induced business cycles result from fluctuations in aggregate demand. For instance, there's fluctuation in business investments. Example is fluctuations in business investments are a major source of business cycles, okay? So fluctuations in business investment, and the source could be directly from, business opportunities, whatever factor that you can think of that affects business outturn can also affect the business cycle, okay? It can also affect the business cycle. And then supply-induced business cycles results from shocks to production that lead to fluctuations in economic activity. And Matilda, oil price shock of the early 1970s, okay, it led to significant fluctuations in the GDP level, all right? Significant fluctuations in this discovery of new technology. When a new technology is discovered, you know what happens? GDP will shoot up, okay? GDP will shoot up, okay? It will shoot up, okay? Jude.
Yeah, sir. I stand to be corrected by you, but
yeah,
what I saw was the exogenous source of business cycle. You said the oil price shocks, and as an example of exogenous business cycle, and the second one being the internal. You said the example is fluctuations in aggregate demand and aggregate supply, and
there is also an oil price shock.
Yeah, there's also oil price shock. So
the oil price shock can have both a direct effect and indirect effect. The indirect effect is that it causes business output or production to fluctuate. So yes, correctly, it is an example of an exogenous shock that can also have a direct effect on GDP, but it can also affect GDP indirectly through fluctuations in production. Is that clear?
Okay, sir.
So here the emphasis is on the productions activities of firms, all right? And I'm saying that the source of that fluctuation in this could be An example could be from an oil price shock.
Okay, sir.
Right. Okay. Good. All right. So let's proceed. Hey, where is Georgina here? Let me hear from you if you are here. Okay. All right. So now let's move on. I'm in the class rep. I haven't seen her online. Is she here? Okay. I think I've seen you now. All right. Okay. Now let's consider output determination in the Keynesian model. How do we determine output in the Keynesian model? So output is demand determined. And I mean, I kind of gave you the storyline some few minutes ago when I told you Keynes' proposition during the periods of the Great Depression was that there was a lack of aggregate demand. And his proposition was that to increase GDP, let's focus on demand. Okay, let's focus on demand. So he says, Keynes says, output is what? Determined, demand determined. National income is what? Demand determined. Okay, so now let's look at the factors of, so output is demand determined. Factors of aggregate demand play a key role in the determination of the equilibrium level of what? Output. The determinants of aggregate demand determines the equilibrium level of what? Of output. This explains fluctuations. This explains determination of output in the short run. In the next slide, you see exactly what we are talking about. So aggregate demand, when we say aggregate demand, it shows the total quantities of goods and services that is demanded by who? Households, firms, governments, and the external sector. Okay, the external sector. The fact of the matter is that no country can exist on its own. No matter what you do, you have to either consume some goods from outside or send some of your goods outside. Okay, imagine what would have happened in this country when and if we decide to operate on our own and not deal with the external world. The cars you see around, you won't see them. Well, maybe the only car you will see is Kantanka, but Kantanka itself, they import most of their things and assemble mostly. That's what basically Kantanka does. Okay, so imagine a world where we don't depend on other countries. Okay, the other countries also depend on them. We give them cocoa. They can't produce cocoa, so they can't enjoy the chocolates. So we give them cocoa. All right, we give them cocoa. We buy metal. Okay, we can't produce the metal, so we buy it. Okay, so now let's look at how do we determine GDP within the Keynesian framework. It says that if you want to determine GDP or output within the Keynesian framework, look at what? Aggregate demand. All right, look at aggregate demand. So aggregate demand tells us where the GDP we have produced is going. The GDP that we have produced, where is it going? Aggregate demand can tell us that. And then we are saying that the constituents of aggregate demand is what? C, desired consumption. D, desired investment. J is government spending. And NX is what? Net exports. Okay, is that clear? NX is net exports. Okay, NX is net exports. Okay, NX is net exports. All right. To understand the determinants of aggregate demand, then we need to understand the determinants of the various components of what? Of aggregate demand. To start with the level of government purchases, it is plausible that this depends on the level of what? Economic activity. If the level of economic activity is low, government might spend more to boost the level of aggregate demand. All right, so basically this is what that slide is saying. All right, look at it very carefully. What we are doing is that we are adding consumption, desired investment, desired G, okay, government spending, and net export. All the slide is saying is that if you want to increase aggregate demand, what do you do? Okay, any of you should raise your hand and answer. If you want to increase, if I want AD to be big, what should I do to either C, I, G, or NX? Raise your hand and answer the question for me. Akosia. Yes, Akosia, please unmute and answer.
That is, I'm trying.
Come again.
Yes, I'm trying.
Okay, go ahead.
You increase desired consumption,
Or
you decrease it.
alternatively, what about the other components? What do you do?
Yeah. You increase desired consumption, and then like what I was thinking is you increase desired consumption and then reduce net exports.
Why would you do that? No, I mean, apart from, okay, forget about the consumption part. What other thing can you do?
Apart from consumption,
Yes.
I think desired investment too.
You can increase desired investments. What about government spending?
That one to the same thing.
Then what about net exports? Net exports is export minus import. So if you want to increase aggregate demand, what do you do to your net exports?
You reduce imports, but increase exports.
Exactly. So that is what this slide is saying, that if we want to increase the level of economic activity, all we need to do is to do what? Increase G, all right? Increase G, all right? So again, back to what we were talking about some weeks ago, that you can decide, for an example of an increase in government purchases is to spend a lot on your military, like the US does. Spend a lot on your military. So your GDP will be going up, okay? Your GDP will be going up. But I mean, last week, or is it the previous week, some of the previous lectures, what we found out was that GDP may be increasing, by a level of standard of living may not necessarily be living. Okay, so that's just by the way, just to give you an idea, all right? Just to give you an idea. Okay. Now let's yes, Matilda, you can increase G and aggregate demand will increase, like in the formula. So this is just pure maths. What do you do if you want to increase AD? Increase either this or this or this. And here, increase exports, reduce imports. Okay? All right. So now let's speak on each of the components of aggregate demand. Okay? Let's speak on each of the components of aggregate demand. So let's speak on consumption. What are the factors that determine consumption? Okay? So the consumption of the desired consumption of any household or individual will depend on, one, the income he has, his immediate income. So if the person's income increases, the chances that he will spend more are high. Okay, if the person has some future income, okay, his consumption spending is likely to do what? To increase. If he has some form of wealth, so he has some gold stored somewhere, he has a couple of houses, he has bought some shares, okay, they'll give him returns, and those things can, what of interest rates? Who can explain that of interest rates? So it depends. If you have a financial instrument and the interest rates are high, you spend more, okay? If the interest rates are high and you have a financial instrument, that you get, if the interest rates are high on those financial instruments, what it means basically is that you get more returns, so you can spend more. But when you're owing somebody and you're paying and your interest rate is high, you pay less, okay? You pay less, okay? You pay less. Then the issue of taxes, all right? You realize that what your income that you take home is not actually what you spend. What you really spend is your income less taxes. We call that one what? Disposable income. Income less taxes. Okay, Louis, I'll go back again. Income less taxes. Income less taxes. We call that one disposable income. So if the taxes are high, the disposable income is what? Is smaller. Okay, so the interest rate thing, I think most of you are interested in this interest rate thing. So the interest rate, it depends on how you are doing the analysis. If the interest rate is on a financial instrument, so for instance, if you are going to buy a treasury bill, so what I do is I give the bank money and I'm giving a certain certificate, and that is my treasury bill. Assigned to that treasury bill is something called an interest rate. How much interest will be paid to me? So if you buy a 90-day treasury bill, at the end of every 3 months, there's some interest that is paid to you. I'm saying that if that interest rate is high enough, your consumption, level of consumption can do what? Can increase. Okay. The alternative is we have different interest rates. So the alternative is when you are owing somebody. Okay. If you are owing somebody, so assuming I'm owing who should I'm owing Samuel. Okay. And Samuel says interest rate on the amount I am owing him is what? Is 50%. Okay. Then I have to be wise and not spend a lot so that I can meet Samuel's commitments. Okay. So that's what I'm talking about. All right. So those are the determinants of consumption. Okay. So those are the determinants of consumption. Okay. All right. So if we follow this John Maynard Keynes and his people, they have this thing called a consumption function, just a mathematical relationship that exists between desired consumption and what? Disposable income. You know, when I was explaining the tax thing, I told you that what? Yes. So Sandra, we can explain it in different ways, but when we are asking you to do that, we'll be very clear on what type of interest rate you are talking about. Okay. All right. Okay. I thought I had some friends in this class. I've forgotten their names. Who are my friends? I've forgotten their names. If you know your friend, show up. Anyway, all right. Ruby. Yeah, Priscilla 1, Priscilla 2. Where are they? I haven't seen them this semester. Yeah, David is also my friend. I haven't seen Priscilla 1. Yeah, Caris. I haven't heard your name before. Linnea and all those people. Where are they? Oh, after the results, Priscilla has run away. Mary, yes, Mary. Anyway. Jude, okay, there's Jude also. David, there's Jude. Albert. This is the first time I'm seeing your name. Josephine. Okay, let's go on. Yes, everybody is my friend. Everybody is my friend. Okay. All right, so let's look at this consumption function. So there's consumption function. I was just saying that what you spend is not really your income, but what you, commercial, but what you really spend is this thing called the disposable income. So there is this functional relationship that exists between C, your desired consumption, and what YD is just disposable income. Okay, YD is just disposable income. All right. Then mathematically, what is alpha? The alpha that we see here, what is it? Alpha is the value of C when Y is what? When YD is 0. Okay, we call that one the intercept. If Y, disposable income, so what this equation is saying is that your level of consumption depends on what? On your disposable income. So if your disposable income is 0, then there's something called alpha. In tree, you call it Okafor-Didi. Okay, Okafor-Didi. The person does not have money, yet he spends. Okay, so that's called autonomous consumption. It is a level of consumption that does not depend on income. Consumption when income is what? Is 0, all right? Consumption when income is 0 is this alpha. And then the beta that you see here tells you what happens to consumption if your disposable income changes by, say, a unit. It measures the change in consumption per unit change in income. What happens to your consumption if your disposable income, okay, the beta that you see here, all right? Okay, Rebecca. Yes, Rebecca, you can unmute and ask your question.
Sir, please, I want to find out realistic examples of autonomous consumption as in our daily life.
It's your consumption when your disposable income is zero. Rebecca, unmute yourself and let's talk.
Sir, I was asking the realistic daily life autonomous consumptions, like maybe some things constitute autonomous consumption in
I'm coming
daily
to ask you. Assuming your disposable, assuming you don't have money on you, do you consume? Oh, Rebecca has muted herself. It will be difficult for me to give you a very realistic example, all right? Because we consume different things, all right? So anything you consume, it could be anything. It could even be things you buy with your own money. But when you are consuming those things, when you don't have disposable income, then we call that autonomous consumption. So it's not like something that I can give an example that if we buy Gary, then Gary is autonomous consumption. Okay, it's not something like that. Like you buy Gary, so buy Gary. No. It can be anything. It can even be a car. So far as you are using a car that you don't have a disposable income, that's it. Okay, so it's not something that we can give a very, it's anything at all that you consume, all right? Elliot, you can unmute and ask your question.
So the autonomous consumption simply means things you can't afford but you are buying, right?
No, that's not it. It is anything you consume when your disposable income is zero. So for instance, anything you anything at all. It's not like the case of inferior goods and those things that we can give very easy examples.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything at all that you consume that, I mean, how do you call it? Your consumption is when your disposable income is zero. All right. Let me get somebody who has not spoken before. Rebecca and Florence. Florence?
Yeah.
Yes.
So please, the autonomous, it means whether your income increases or not, you can still buy.
No, what it means is that you don't have any, not even income, disposable income. You don't have the disposable income, yet you are consuming something. Okay, you don't have the disposable income and you are consuming something. So any level of consumption that does not depend on income is your disposable income. Is your autonomous consumption. Okay, it's difficult to give an example to say that when you consume, so anything you consume when you don't have an income. All right, so it's an example of something like a free good sort of. Okay, something like a free good sort of. Okay, that you are not spending your income on. All right. Okay, let me, Akosia, you can unmute and ask your question.
Yeah. Yes, please. Can you say that the school's Wi-Fi is an example? You see, even if you don't have, even if you don't have money, like to buy
No. So I'm talking about things that you really spend your income on. The moment you are consuming those kind of things, when you don't have a disposable income, is an example of autonomous. So if Wi-Fi, it's not a very good example. I mean, it's not. So it could be anything at all. I mean, it could be anything. It could be the Wi-Fi. Fine. I mean, it could be the Wi-Fi. Okay, you can consume it. No, Kweku, autonomous consumption is not financed right. But your savings is also a form of income. Okay. So anything you don't spend your income on, but you kind of consume. All right. Okay. Okay. So it's difficult to give a certain specific example, all right? So the Keynesian, Isabella, what is your example? Yes, Isabella. Okay, Florence. Oh, type it again. The messages are a lot, so I haven't seen it. Florence, you can unmute and ask your question.
Sir, please, it's the previous ones.
Okay, all right, okay. Okay, so now let's look at some characteristics about this MPC thing, all right? So you know what MPC is that slope coefficient, the beta, okay? It's a beta, okay? So the MPC thing is the beta, and the MPC is assumed to be constant, okay? Then there is this thing called the average propensity to consume, okay? The fraction of income that is spent on consumption. So you know your income, in fact, your disposable income. Say, can money given to us by, oh, the messages are a lot, so I don't say, can money given to us by our parent be an autonomous? Oh no, that money is so that thing is more like a gift. It's not even an income. Okay, it's not even an income. It's like a gift that you are supposed. So we are looking at basically our people who earn a salary and there's a tax deducted from it. All right, that's what you are referring to as the disposable income. Okay, yeah. So the money is more like a transfer payment. But even you see, the reason why I try to explain is that even transfer payment, some way somehow, it is accounted for in the national income. All right. Okay, it is some way somehow accounted for. Okay. All right. So don't worry about citing example. Nobody will ask you to cite an example of autonomous consumption. No, nobody will ask you to cite an example like that. But what we want is for you to be able to do it. Explain what autonomous consumption is. Okay. All right. So now these are some concepts you need to be familiar with. The marginal propensity to consume. So the marginal propensity to consume is the slope coefficient that you see in the consumption function. Then we have the average propensity to consume, which is just the fraction of the income that is consumed. So mathematically, it's just the consumption function divided by what? Disposable income. This consumption function that we see here, we are going to divide it by what? By disposable income, all right? So when you do the division, so it is alpha plus BYD, all divided by what? YD. So for the beta side, the YDs will cancel and we left to only what? Beta. But for the alpha side, we'll have alpha divided by what? YD. Okay, is it clear? Let me know who cannot solve this by him or herself. Who cannot solve this by him or herself? Let me know. Or I should assume we can all solve it. Priscilla? Yes, Priscilla. Priscilla, you can unmute and speak. Okay. So let me just take it over again. So this consumption function that we have here, alpha plus beta YD, divide the whole thing by YD and let's see. The alpha plus beta YD. Okay, divide the whole thing and let's see. Okay, so when you divide it, you see you get alpha over YD plus beta YD over YD, and the YDs will cancel and to left with what? Only beta. Is that okay? Yes, Nicole. Is it Nicholas or Nicole? Oh, damn. Please mute again. Unmute again. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm trying to work it. I think I'm cool with it now.
You're cool now. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Who again? Okay. So I assume you have all been able to work it. Right. Right. Okay, so that's how they got this APC. All right. So APC is just average propensity to consume. Okay. And this decreases with income. Okay. It decreases with income. You can see clearly the relationship that exists between APC and what? And disposable income. CYD is just the C divided by YD. C divided by YD. So C is what we saw previously. I'm taking my time here because when I was marking, I realized some of you were struggling with the mathematics. Okay. You're struggling with the mathematics. So that C is what you see here, alpha plus BYD. Okay. Okay. Why divide both sides by YD? Okay, all right, so that you see the C over YD. Okay, yeah, all right, okay, all right. Recall that the part of disposable income that is not spent on consumption is what is saved. So income is either consumed or saved. So if we've dealt with the APC, we can deal with we can derive a savings function from the consumption function. Okay, so here what we are talking about is that savings is just disposable income minus consumption. Disposable income minus consumption. So YD minus, this is the consumption that we saw previously, alpha. So it is alpha plus beta YD. But because of the negative here, when we open it, then we'll get what? YD minus alpha minus beta YD. And we can rewrite it as minus alpha plus 1 minus beta YD. Guys, try it. Try solving it and let's see. Let me see if you can solve it. Try solving it and let me see whether you can solve it. Has anybody finished solving it? Let me know. Okay, good. So Martha says she has been able to solve it. Who next? Moses. You factorize out. Nicholas. So Nicholas, have you been able to do it? Florence, you are bringing this autonomous consumption thing again. All right, okay. So a couple of people have been able to solve it. The one is you are taking YD out. That's what I think Nicholas was saying. You factorize YD out. Louisa. So you see there's YD here, there's YD here. So put them together. There's YD here, there's YD here. Okay, good. All right. So here, minus alpha, the intercept, is autonomous dis-saving. Autonomous dis-saving. And then 1 minus beta becomes the what? Marginal propensity to do what? To save. 1 minus beta now becomes the marginal propensity to save. Okay, it becomes the marginal propensity to save. I hope that is clear. Is it clear? All right, good. So MPC is marginal propensity to consume. It's the other end, the consumption function that we dealt with here. Okay. Okay. But this one is slightly different. Okay. We are looking at the savings function. So what we've basically done was to take out consumption from, income is either saved or what? Or consumed. The Y minus beta is coming, put YD minus beta YD together. All right. So when you put them together, so it is, Rebecca, it is the saving because of the negative. All right. That's why it is the saving. So 1 minus beta is when you are putting YD So do YD minus beta YD. If you take out the YD and you form a bracket, what you get is 1 minus beta. Fatih, is that correct? Have you seen it now? Fatih, I'm waiting for your response. All right, good. Okay. Now let's look at the level of desired investment. There are some other things here. I mean, for instance, MPS, marginal propensity to save plus marginal propensity to consume should be equal to 1 and that kind of thing. Don't worry too much about it now. All right, don't worry too much about that now. Okay. Now let's move to investments. Okay, so let's look at and the determinants of investments. Okay, so investments depends clearly on interest rates. When the interest rate is high, you invest low. When interest rate is high, it's expensive. Credit is what? It's expensive. So you don't go chasing funds when interest rates are high. You chase the funds when the interest rates are what? Are low. And you get the funds, you invest it, you get more profit, you pay more in return as an interest. Okay. So there's this negative relationship that exists between the cost of capital. So the cost of capital is the interest rate, the real interest rate. Okay. The user cost of capital, the real interest rate. Okay. Okay. So there's a negative relationship between the real interest rate and what the desired investment level. Okay. Desired investment level. Again, business expectations can be an important determinant of what? Of investment. So for instance, if you expect that future, I mean, a prospect for the future. So for instance, around October, November, business people know that December, their business will be good. So between October, they put in their best. Okay, they put in their best, October, November. So that's what we are talking about, business expectation. But if you expect that the future will be bright, you put in much more investments. Okay, taxes. So business taxes. Again, we can even talk about the expectation. If you expect that taxes will increase, then you do all your investment now. You don't go and do it when taxes have gone up and then you lose. Okay, you lose. Okay, all right. Then we can also talk about investment tax credit. Investment tax credit means you have been given some tax bracket. So what happens, for instance, in firms that are located at the free zones area? The free zones area, they are given 10 years tax-free. They don't pick. So the idea is for you to use that 10 years to get as many people employed, exploit the export market, gain grounds. Then after the 10 years, they taxing you. All right. So normally what business people do is that these first 10 years that you are tax-free, they do everything possible. Enter the export market, increase their size, that kind of thing. All right. And so the free zones is one example. It's an example of one of the incentives that government is using to boost manufacturing activities, to boost industrializations, for investment to increase. All right. Okay. In the models we'll be dealing with for now, we'll assume that the level of investment is exogenous. Exogenous simply means that it does not depend on interest rate. Okay, we are going to assume that it does not depend on what? On interest rates. We are going to assume that it does not depend on interest rate. So we assume it to be what? Exogenous. So we will represent it by what? I naught, to show that it is what? It is exogenous. Is it clear? Is it clear? Are we still here? All right. Well, let me hear from you. Okay. All right, good. Okay, so now let's go into this net export thing. I should unmute you. All right, okay. Let me allow you to unmute and let me hear from you. So you can now unmute and let me hear from you. Yes, Gertrude. Are you just trying to unmute or you want to talk?
Sir, please, the one you just said, I don't understand.
When they ask, you want to talk?
Yes, please, I want to talk.
What do you want to say?
Before this one.
Okay, so what is the problem?
There's the juniors.
Exogenous simply means that.
But the one you are saying in a simplified model, yeah, I don't
assume that the level of investment is exogenously fixed. So if you look at this one, for instance, consumption one, it is not exogenous because it is depending on something, disposable income. What I'm saying is that, yes, we can have investment, we can also have a function for it, like we had for the C. But now we won't have any function like that. Investment, there's in fact an investment function that you can write as a function of what? Interest rates. We are saying that we are not going to assume any function of that sort. So we assume it as given. It is fixed. So instead of, say, having an investment function of, say, 500 minus R, 0.5 R, there's nothing like that. We'll say that I naught is equal to 500, and that is it. Is that clear? Is that clear?
Right. Yes, yes.
All right, okay. Cal artistry. Okay. All right. Okay, now let's move on. Let's look at net exports. Okay. So net exports, don't forget, net exports is just the difference between what? Total exports and what? Total imports. Net exports is just the difference between total exports and what? Total imports. Oh, damn. Priscilla says her connection is very bad today. Maybe you should go and use the autonomous consumption Wi-Fi. Is that the one you are using? Okay. Oh, you are using the autonomous consumption Wi-Fi. All right. Okay. So let's move on. So net exports, it depends on domestic income. Okay. It depends on domestic income. It depends on, Sarah says it's not funny. It depends on foreign income. It also depends on what? The real exchange rate. All right. So if incomes are increasing, I mean, people will want diversity in the type of goods that they consume. So we'll see people being ostentatious and then buying foreign goods. So that's where domestic income determines net exports. Okay. Okay. And don't forget, foreigners too can live ostentatious lifestyle. Okay. Foreigners can also live that as ostentatious and buy our goods. So they import from us. We can also import from them. All right. But the most important thing for you to know is that these two things all depends on what? The real exchange rate. Okay. How much of the CD can be converted into a dollar to buy good from another country. Okay. So that kind of thing. It depends on the real exchange rate. It depends on the real exchange rate. Okay. I don't want to go far, but I could have picked this depreciation, appreciation issues, but just let's leave it here and just say that, I mean, the exchange rate is an important determinant. Okay. It's an important determinant of net exports. Again, in our model, we are going to assume net exports to be what? To be fixed. Okay. So we call it NX naught. Okay. NX naught. All right. So now let's put all the things together. So we start with a basic model by assuming a closed economy. So when we say the economy is closed, when we say the economy is a closed economy, then we are saying that net export is zero. When the economy is open, net export is not zero. Now here we are going to start with a very basic model where we assume that there's no government contribution, no government intervention, and the economy is also closed. Closed means net export is equal to what? It's equal to zero. All right? It is equal to zero. So here we are saying that aggregate demand, okay, aggregate demand is determined by what? Consumption plus what? Investment. Aggregate demand is determined by what? Consumption and what? And investment. So the economy will reach an equilibrium when Y, national income, is equal to what? Don't forget, we said that output is what? Demand determined. Output is what? Demand determined. So equilibrium will be reached when Y is equal to what? AD. All right, so now let's go and look at this thing they call the Keynesian cross. Okay, this is called the Keynesian cross. All right, so there's a 45-degree line, and any point on that 45-degree line, national income is equal to what? Aggregate demand. National income is what? Equal to what? Aggregate demand. Then we have the consumption function, what we had as alpha plus beta YD, the alpha plus beta YD. What we had as alpha plus beta YD, if we plot it, this will be it. Now you can see that this C line, the consumption function, the consumption curve, and aggregate demand curve is vertical. It's very simple. The reason is simply because investment is what? It's exogenous. It's fixed throughout. It is fixed throughout. So that's why this C line and this AD line are parallel. The AD line, don't forget the AD line is simply the C line plus what? Plus the I is the C line plus the I. Okay, so it gives you this AD. So equilibrium is attained at the point where aggregate demand meets the 45-degree line. Okay, so Maurice, I've seen your question. Yes, I'm told there is a TA. I'm told there is an ATA. I'll try and see how to fix the TA to do a tutorial for you. Or alternatively, I have already spoken to Georgina, your course rep, about it. I've asked her to get me a couple of past questions from the business school. And then one of these days, instead of a class, we'll just come and solve questions. And then I'll allow you to unmute and ask me all sort of questions you want to ask me. All right? Okay. We'll just, one of these classes next week, one of the classes next week, all we'll do is solve questions. And I'll try and see if I can get also some objectives for you to. Nowadays, the pressure is a lot. I mean, I've been teaching almost the whole day today. Tomorrow to the whole day, I may teach, that kind of thing. But I'll try and get some objectives for you as practice questions so that, you can use it to, prepare yourself for either the IE that will be coming very soon or the main exams itself, which is in 3 weeks. Okay. So definitely you'll get something like that, all right? Okay, so now let's move on. So now let's do an algebraic solution. So basically, in this economy, we are saying that C should be equal to A plus BY. And then we are saying that investment should be what? Should be exogenous. Equilibrium condition requires that national income is equal to what? Aggregate demand. So now we can fix the values in there, okay? So if Y equals AD, what is AD? AD is what? C plus I. What is C? C is A plus BY. A plus BY. What is I? I is I naught. Okay, so we are saying that Y should be equal to A plus BY plus I naught. Now, this next equation, what happens here is this. Y is moved to the left-hand side. So it is minus M plus BY here. If it moves to the left-hand side, it becomes what? Minus BY. And what is left is what? A plus I naught. All right? A plus I naught. A plus I naught. Then we can rewrite this left-hand side of the equation. Let's just take Y out. Let's put Y outside the bracket. Then we have what? 1 minus B. 1 minus B. A plus I naught. So in equilibrium, all we have to do is this particular function. Let's divide both the left-hand side and the right-hand side by what? By 1 minus B. Divide the left-hand side and the right-hand side by 1, and it leads us to this. So guys, try it and let's see. Try it and let me know whether you have been able to solve it in this very simple model. Try and solve it and let me know if you have been able to do that. Oh, okay, Rebecca, you have been able to do it. Beautiful. Louisa too has been able to. So let me see those that have been able to do it. I'll give you some 5 marks. So let me know if you have been able to do it. Just type yes, and I'll just take a log of all those that have responded, and then I'll give all of you 5. Beautiful. So some of you, I can see you've not done it, and you are saying yes. Are you sure you have all solved it? Oh, okay. All right. Beautiful. Okay. All right. So now let's move on. So there is this thing called the multiplier. All right. The multiplier. So it's like just the slope coefficient of this part of the function. All right. Just the slope coefficient of this part of the function. So the multiplier is just 1/1 minus beta. All right. That becomes the government, the expenditure multiplier, the autonomous expenditure multiplier. All right, yes, you can unmute and ask your questions. Matilda and Angela.
Sir, please, what's the meaning of the YE?
So YE is just the equilibrium level of national income.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, Angela, who just asked the question? I think it's Matilda. Angela, go ahead. Or Jude, you can also unmute and ask a question.
Okay, so with the y is equal to AD, which also is equal to A plus beta Y plus the I naught. So I don't really get, because I think I learned that AD is equal to C plus I plus G plus NS. But why is that you just ignored the rest and you only use consumption and investment?
Yes, because we are assuming a closed economy where there is no government spending and there's no net export. We can have an open economy with government spending where all of those things can show up.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Okay, who else wants to ask? Angela, you can unmute and ask your question. All right, so let's move on. Okay, so the multiplier in this very simple model, all right? So as Jude was saying, if we expand the model and put in net exports and those things, or even if we make investments no longer autonomous and exogenous or autonomous, all right, and it's more induced, the multiplier can change. But for now, let's deal with a very simple, okay, let's deal with a very simple model where there's no G, there's no NX. All right, so now the autonomous expenditure multiplier becomes 1/1 minus B. This B here, don't forget, it is what? Yes, Priscilla. Priscilla, what is it? Have you typed something I haven't seen? You can unmute and talk. Oh, Priscilla, your internet is terrible.
Couldn't solve it.
You couldn't solve it?
No.
Oh, Priscilla.
Yeah.
Where did you have the problem?
This one.
Which one?
The substitution. How we face in the consumption and the investments in the equilibrium rate.
Oh, so here, Priscilla, we are saying that AD is C plus I. Add C and I, and you get this one. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Now move group-like terms. Bring all the Y's together and leave the others on the right-hand side of the equal sign. Okay. So bring YD, BY here. That is how we got this one. Okay.
Okay.
Then we substitute Y, or we factorize Y out so that we can have this bracket here. So this thing here becomes y into bracket 1 minus b. That's what you see here. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now divide both sides of the equation by 1 minus b.
Okay.
You got it now?
I get it now. Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about this multiplier. So the autonomous expenditure multiplier. It is simply a multiple by which a change in any component of the autonomous expenditures increases what? Equilibrium output. All right. So if I know what the multiplier is, okay, I can tell the extent to which GDP will change if any of the autonomous elements changes. And in this case, the autonomous elements that we are talking about is what? It's autonomous consumption and what? And investment, exogenously determined investment. Okay, those are the autonomous elements. Okay, so assuming B, marginal propensity to consume is equal to 0.2. All right, assuming marginal propensity to consume is 0.2, assuming B is 0.2, what will be the multiplier? Guys, calculate it for me and let me see. Assuming B is 0.2, what will be the multiplier? It will be what? 1 divided by what? 0.8. Type the answers and let's see.
Yes, sir.
I'm not an entrepreneur.
So 1.25.
1.25.
Yes, 1.25. 1.25.
1.25.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, beautiful. And I'm saying that if we know what this 1.25 is, and any of the autonomous elements changes by say
The 1.25.
Okay. And if any of the autonomous elements changes, okay, that's what I'm saying. If any of the autonomous elements changes, we can determine the extent to which national income to do what will change. All right. Okay. Okay. Now let's complicate the model a little bit and add the government sector. All right. Let's add G to the AD model. All right. So we have C plus I plus G. Okay. Our model changes in two main ways when we add governments to it. One, government make purchases. And how do they finance the purchase? They finance it through the government revenues, which come in the form of what? Taxes. Okay, we finance it through government revenue, which is generated in the form of what? Taxes. We therefore have to make changes to our basic model, to make changes to our basic relationships to reflect these two things. Government spends, but where does it get the money to spend? From taxes. Okay, Nandede, I think Nandede got lost a little bit. So we're calculating a multiplier, all right? We're calculating a multiplier. Is it that Nandede, you were not getting the 1.25 or you don't know what the 1.25 is? You can raise your hand, I'll allow you to unmute and then we talk. Nandede. Hey. Okay, Angel. Oh, okay. So now they just joined. We were calculating a multiplier. Okay, we were just. I mean, is it that some people don't know how to calculate it? Is it that some people don't know how to calculate it? If you had difficulties calculating it, please let me know. Exactly, Martha. Exactly. Okay, let me allow you. Just unmute yourself. Hey, Francis and Nicole, you all didn't get it. You can unmute and talk, any of you. Ruth, hey. Oh, okay. So any of you who didn't know how to get it, just let me know. Just unmute and let's talk. Hey, Caroline. Okay. So let me go back now. All I was saying is this. This is the formula for the autonomous expenditure multiplier. This is the formula. I'm saying that this B here, which is marginal propensity to consume, all right? Assuming it was 0.2, if B was 0.2, what will be the multiplier? So make B 0.2. So for the denominator, 1 minus 0.2 will become what? 0.8. So do 1 divided by 0.8, and it will give you the 1.25 that almost everybody was getting. Okay? Those who couldn't solve it.
Let's do the right one.
Do you understand now?
When yes, yeah.
Those that were not able to solve, do you understand now? Okay. All right. Okay. Let me just mute everybody. All right. So let's finish this up, and then we'll see what we will do. All right. So now let's add government. I'm saying that the moment we add government, we've complicated things a little bit, simply because the government spends, and government finances that spending through what? Through taxes. All right, through taxes. So now let's complicate the model a little bit. And please try and get these very simple ones, because we'll complicate it a little bit more. All right, we'll complicate things a little bit more. So we'll make the same assumption about government taxes. So we'll continue to assume that government purchases are exogenously determined, and then the taxes are also exogenously determined. Okay. Now let's move on. So now this becomes the model we are going to deal with. The model we are going to deal with is this, where we have C, consumption to depend on A plus B. Now what? It's no longer Y, it is what? YD, where YD is what? Y minus T. This is disposable income. So disposable income is income minus tax. Okay. This YD here is Y minus T. Okay. And then we are assuming investment to be exogenously determined. And then we are assuming gene to also be what? Exogenously determined. So the equilibrium condition that requires that we equate AD to what? To Y. So now let's come here. This equation, this is how they got it. We have C. So C is A plus B. YD is now what? Y minus T. Okay, income less tax is disposable income, plus I naught plus G naught, and that gives us the full model. Okay, now we can expand this and get A plus BY minus BT plus I naught plus G naught. Now the BY, let's group like terms. So let's move this BY to the left-hand side. Okay, that is how they got the Y minus BY. Okay, Y minus BY. Okay, earlier on when we didn't have the government and this thing, when we didn't add the government sector, this was what we got. Now, when we add the government sector, what we are getting is this: A minus B, this B multiplied by this T, so minus BT, plus I naught plus G naught. Okay, so you see that when we compare the equation we have now to the one we had earlier on, there are some new things: minus beta T0, and then what? This gene. So please, where from the T? T is taxes. Okay, we are saying that when we bring in the government sector, the government spends, and it is called government expenditure, and they finance that spending from taxes. So taxes is the revenue part of government. Gene is the expenditure part. Okay, and where do they get these taxes from? Not from themselves. They get it from what? Households. And how can they get with the households? It's from the consumption that we consume, all right? Our consumption expenditures. And we said our consumption expenditures depend on what? On income. So government takes the tax from our income. And what comes to us for us to really, really spend is what is called what? Disposable income. exactly, the B is the same as the marginal propensity to consume. Okay, is the same as the marginal propensity to consume. So what happens here is this. The last equation, to get the equilibrium national income, divide both sides by what? So divide this place by 1 over 1 minus B, and divide this place 2 by what? 1 minus B. So B is indeed, yes, the marginal propensity to consume. All right, B is indeed the marginal propensity. So guys, solve it, and let me know. Again, I'll give 5 marks to anybody that's able to confirm that he has been able to solve it. So if you're able to solve it, just type yes, 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 I've been able to solve it. Your 5 marks is intact. Okay, all right. So it's, I can see a lot of people saying, yeah, I've been able to solve it. Okay, let me try and wind up so that those of you who want to go to the next class can really join your friends for the next class. All right. So, okay, in fact, this is even the last slide. All right. So this is the last slide. So what is happening? It's almost the same thing because I and G are exogenously determined. I and G are what? Exogenously determined. Okay, I and G are exogenously determined. Okay. So that brings us to the end of the class. Next week, one of the classes, what we'll do is we'll work examples. So I'll go and look for some nice examples. All right, I'll look for some nice examples and bring it so that we solve it. All right, okay, we solve it. What I realized from the exams is that some of you, very simple simultaneous equations, you were not able to solve it. I don't know whether it was the online thing, but let's see how we're doing. All right. So next week, one of the classes, all we'll do is to solve examples. All right. Okay. All right. Clifford.
Yeah, please, I wanted to say that the last calculation we did, the network was bad, so I didn't really get it. That was
Which
what
one?
I wanted
This one?
to say. Yeah, this one, yes.
So the only difference is that there's a YD, which is disposable income, and there's a Y minus T term that enters, and then there's a G naught also that enters. All right. The rest is just algebra. Just group like terms and make Y the subject of the equation. All right. Okay. So you can unmute and ask any question. Let's do that in the next 5 minutes and then we'll close.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yes. All right. So any question?
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, please, my results is not reflecting on my Miss Web.
Okay. All right. We'll deal with that one.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Who else has a question about the class? Oh, the expenditure multiplier has not changed. Okay, it's 1 over 1 minus B. It's still the same. We need face-to-face tutorials. Hey, Owusu. Don't worry, we'll do one online next week and see how it will go. All right. Oh, am I supporting? Charlotte, you need face-to-face. Okay. It's about venues, but don't worry, let's try next week. Let's try a tutorial next week and see. We'll solve an example. I'll see if I can get this, how do they even call it? They say they call it whiteboard or something. I'll try and see if I can use the whiteboard and see how it will look like. Oh, okay. It's a little difficult, but
please, you can type too.
I can type?
Yes, please, using the whiteboard.
Okay, so why? It's not typing.
Yeah, there's a way of doing it. So unless maybe you ask for someone
okay.
assistant.
I get it. I get it now. Y equals so for instance, we have C equals A plus B Y D. Okay, and we are saying that the YD is A plus B into Y minus T, right? And then we can expand this to get A plus BY minus A plus BY minus BT, okay? Then, okay, all right, okay. So we'll see how we'll do it next week, all right?
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so let's end the class here. Let's end the class here now, and then we'll meet next week, all right?
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. God bless you.
Enjoy your day.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
All right. Charlie, that'll be all. Is that?